Tigran Hamasyan is a name in the jazz world that is nowhere near talked up enough, because compared to his contemporaries, compared to some of the jazz acts that get hyped up today, I think he's well within his right to be up there with, you know, the best, and considered one of the best at the moment, because his material so far has been really good. I didn't talk about his last full-length album in full on this channel, but I did hype it up in a video somewhere. I did think it was really good, but actually, you know what, I think he stepped up things even further with his newest album here. I think this is the best album I've heard from him to date, which does make me really happy, because I don't get too many jazz albums per year that I hype up on this channel, but when I find one that I really like, I tend to like to gush over it. Just like Jorby's album from last year, that was sensational, one of the best of the year. There was also Bad Bad Not Good's comeback album too, which was fantastic. But yeah, this year it seems as though that currently in the midst of May, we have a jazz album of the year contender with StandArt. I certainly don't think this is going to be considered groundbreaking within its genre. I think in a lot of ways it's pretty much influenced by other styles of jazz. You know, you've got your freeform jazz, you've got your cool jazz in places as well. Look, there's lots of unique ideas coming through, but I would say a lot of it is pretty familiar. But I just think the presentation of the album is what wins me over. I think these tracks are really sporadic, they're eventful, you don't necessarily know what direction some of them are going to go in, and even as you go through the album, you're not entirely sure of where it's going to go either. I think there's a really nice quality and charm to this. I think the piano playing is what steals the show in a lot of these tracks, particularly on the first track, Didar, which is just so jaggedy and all over the place and directionless in a way that I think could maybe put listeners off if you want a bit more of a structured jazz song. But if you're looking for something a bit more hyperactive and difficult to calm down, then these pianos are going to be right up your alley. There's just like no rhyme or reason to them, but it still feels like the track is cohesive and also just takes you in a really cool direction, which I really enjoy. I didn't know what time it was, which is a thing you'd say to your boss when the clocks go forward and you're late for work. Is a track that's actually much more somber in its tone, and there's not as much of a urgency to this one. The tone is lighter, but actually when you pay attention to piano and listen to how, again, it's so all over the place and off its rocker, you're actually getting quite a nice juxtaposition with that, and how the track in its tone is very soft and kind of like depressing in a way. In fact, there's a bit of a trend of that towards the end of the album, where you enter the track softly as the morning sunrise, where the album just seems to be going in a much more delicate and depressing direction, not in a bad way. I think they're still kind of, you know, beautifully sad songs, but it's interesting how you do start to slip into those moments. I Should Care is much more negative. It sort of feels like the album in a way might be heading into a kind of relationship sort of angle with these tracks, particularly the title of the tracks as well. It's sort of like that point, the breaking point of a relationship. You know, I should care, but it's all going to shit. And then your last track is Laura, which is literally named after a girl. It could be maybe the reignition of a relationship, because this track really does feel a bit more positive and ends on a higher note. And maybe I'm just reaching hard here, but I don't know, I quite like that there is an interpretation that I've picked up from this album, even if I don't, you know for sure if it exists or not. Because as much as I like jazz, it's not often that you actually get a storyline within a jazz album, or maybe not as frequent as other albums, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to downplay all jazz music by saying that, but I just think, you know, with albums that have a narrative, lyrics, a story behind it, it's easier to pick up on. But with this album, it sort of like feels like it's subtly going in that kind of direction. Could be wrong, but I like having that interpretation nevertheless. All the Things You Are, When a Woman Loves a Man, much more positive tracks that feel like they're oozing with romanticism. They kind of have that classiness that you'd expect from Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, which I've always thought was a very romantic sounding album, and All the Things You Are oozes that so much. just such a beautiful track. But then you got Bigfoot, which is just a manic centerpiece of the album that has absolutely no right to be here, considering how chaotic and adventurous it is. But at the same time, it has every right to be here because it's probably the best song, to be honest. It's an absolute mammoth. Even in its length and runtime, it's a long track and it's just so spastic and out of control. Honestly, it's such a fantastic moment on the album. I think if I was picking one song that I wanted someone to listen to for this album as a sort of taster to see what, you know, you're getting with Tigran as an artist, this is that song. This just absolutely rips you to shreds. It's fantastic. So yeah, overall, I really like this album. I mean, I've picked up my own interpretations in terms of the narrative and things like that. Not even sure if they're entirely there, but you know, music is good for that kind of thing because you get your own interpretation of music, particularly with albums like this. So I like that in my mind, there is a weird relationship thing going on somewhere in between the lines. And even if that didn't exist, I'd still call this a great album anyway, because it is just fantastic jazz music. So there you go. It's an 8 out of 10 from me. One of my favourite albums of the year in general, and particularly in the genre of jazz music. Jazz music, it's definitely up there too. So yeah, thank you for watching as always. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please check out my Patreon if you are interested in supporting me. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what I should review next. And goodbye.